Jen.
Reports has just dropped now that a vessel has been intercepted in an attempt to illegally enter Australia from Sri Lanka. What's your response to that?
Well, I can confirm that.
On Election Day 2022, Scott Morrison announced that Border Force had intercepted a boat trying to come to Australia. This might not seem like a big deal, but what happened before and after this announcement showed that this was a desperate act by a desperate government trying to cling to power.
And I can simply say this. I've been here to stop this boat, but in order for me to be there to stop those that may come from here, you need to vote Liberal and Nationals today.
In 2013, the Abbott government introduced Operation Sovereign Borders to target boat arrivals, which had become a major political issue. This operation is still in force today, and importantly, Labor now has the same policy on this as the coalition. As part of the strategy, boats are intercepted and either turned around, or the people on board are taken to an offshore holding centre and then in most cases returned back home. Over the years, very little information has been shared about these operations, and that's been deliberate. The government has always said that they will not comment on what they call on-water matters. Let me introduce you to who came up with those rules in the first place.
Scott Morrison, Minister of Immigration and Border Protection and Minister responsible for Operation Sovereign Borders. Operational information is not publicly released or subject to public commentary by the government. The government believes that disclosure of such operational information, which includes but is not limited to on-water tactics, specific incident reports, intelligence, timing and occurrence of operations, and the identification of individual attempted voyages, passenger information, including nationalities involved in those voyages, as this would prejudice current and future operations, it would put people at risk who are involved in our operations, and unnecessarily cause damage to Australia's national security, defence and international relations.
And this position was taken seriously.
I will not comment further in relation to on-water matters. Thank you.
General, this is a great public interest.
I will not comment further in relation to on-water matters.
Have they been...
I will not comment further in relation to on-water matters. I think we've dealt with that question.
And it's basically stayed that way for years. There's been a handful of times where Peter Dutton has released a media statement well after the fact, but nothing really more than that. As Scott Morrison himself said, publicising this kind of information will apparently undermine Operation Sovereign Borders. So with that in mind, let's have a detailed look at what happened on Election Day when Scott Morrison changed from one reality to another. As soon as Labor came into government, they ordered an investigation into the release of the statement.
Now, we've asked the Secretary of the Department of Home Affairs to look into this matter.
The report was then released in June 2022, and it is eye-opening. Morrison's announcement was in itself unprecedented. The report found no other instance in almost 10 years where the department had published information about specific operations. But let's go behind the scenes. It all started on the morning of the federal election, the 21st of May 2022. A vessel was intercepted by the Australian Border Force near Christmas Island. Scott Morrison was due to give a press conference at 1 p.m. At 11:59 a.m, Karen Andrews, the then Minister for Home Affairs, got her office to contact the Department of Home Affairs. She directed the department to issue a statement in relation to the interception of the vessel. The justification was that the Prime Minister wants a statement. Minutes later, Karen Andrews tells the department the statement is to be completed within 15 minutes. Half an hour after that, Karen Andrews contacts the department to ask why the statement is taking so long. They reply that it's because there is no existing template and that everyone's running around trying to get clearances, which makes sense. What they've been asked to do is unprecedented. Anyway, she asked to see the draft they've been working on in the meantime. The department provides the draft and it's obvious they've tried to word it in a way that doesn't give specific information. A few minutes later, Karen Andrews sends them back the changes she wants made, specifically putting in information the government has itself previously said is to the detriment of operations. But Karen Andrews isn't happy with just making changes to the statement. She now also directs the department to email the statement to a list of select journalists. The department says no, So Karen Andrews then says, fine, I want the statement urgently published on the website, and I want the Australian Border Force to tweet the statement. The department pushes back again, saying they'll publish the statement on the website, but not to social media. And this is when at 12:48 PM, the head of the department tells everyone that under no circumstances is the department to drop the story to selected journalists. The release, once cleared, is to be posted to our news and media sites, no more and no less. This is probably a good time to stop and take in the desperation from Karen Andrews and the pressure she is putting on the department. Around this time, Scott Morrison is arriving at the destination of his final press conference as Prime Minister. Remember, he's about to start talking soon and he wants to be able to politicise this issue. So let's get back to the timeline. It's now 1 PM on the dot, and the department loads the statement into the website for publishing. 3 minutes later, Scott Morrison starts his press conference.
And there's nothing like coming home here to the Shire, where Jenny and I have made our home and our family life.
Karen Andrews is now panicking. Text messages between the Minister's office and the department show the constant pressure being applied here. Is it live? PM is speaking. The department responds with, I'm refreshing. So are we. What on earth is the issue? Says Karen Andrews' office. The department then says, it always takes a few minutes to go live. I have no idea how it works, but we can't influence it. We are calling IT. The Minister's office replies with, a lot of people are furious. The department closes with, nothing we can do, legitimately nothing, so my sincere apologies.
Jen.
At 1:06 PM, the Prime Minister then actively seeks out a question from a particular journalist. Remember, the statement has not yet gone live, and so there is no publicly available information about this.
Jen.
Reports just dropped now that a vessel has been intercepted in an attempt to illegally enter Australia from Sri Lanka. What's your response to that?
Well, I can confirm that there has been an interception of a vessel en route to Australia. That vessel has been intercepted in accordance with the policies of the government, and they're following those normal protocols. And I can simply say this. I've been here to stop this boat, but in order for me to be there to stop those that may come from here, you need to vote Liberal and Nationals today. And in the interests of full transparency, in the middle of an election campaign, the Labor Party was advised of this, and a statement has been issued by the Border Protection authorities.
About on-water matters when you're Immigration Minister.
It's only once the press conference has finished, at 1:09 PM, that the statement finally appears on the department's website. What this tells us is that the coalition leaked the information to journalists and set up a question for the Prime Minister in advance. Now, this isn't unique, but it's one of the few times where it's so obvious. The journalist who asked the question was Jennifer Beshwadi from Channel 7 and formerly Sky News. And I use the word journalist loosely. Journalists are not supposed to be working for the government and doing their bidding. They're meant to inform the public of what's going on and hold people to account. After the press conference, with Scott Morrison posing some more for the camera, you may have thought it was all over, but the Liberal Party wasn't finished. The party started spamming Australians in marginal seats all across the country with the news, including a link to a Liberal Party political page. And Peter Dutton, within minutes of the Border Force statement going live, was also tweeting rubbish like, people smugglers have decided who is going to win the election and the boats have started, and that voters can't afford to vote Labor, even though they both share the same policy when it comes to this. The scare campaign obviously didn't work. After Election Day, attention was focused on Karen Andrews. She started being asked about what had happened, and her version of events is interesting.
I wanted to clarify, as this investigation kicks off, did you approve that statement, firstly?
I saw the statement before it was released. There is a secondary issue of text messages that were sent out. I had nothing to do with the text messages.
That were the text messages
I had
sent
no knowledge of them.
Voters in Liberal seats. But getting back to the statement, okay, you saw that statement before it went out. So did you press the button and say, yes, Border Force, you can release that statement?
Well, Border Force would have been releasing it in any event, making that statement.
That is a lie. Border Force would not have released a statement in any event. They have never issued a statement like this before. Karen Andrews was the one that asked them to issue the statement, in fact directed them to do it. making changes to the wording and pressuring them to do it quickly. But it gets better.
Karen, isn't the point not that caretaker provisions weren't breached, but that you tried to pressure the department to breach those provisions? Isn't that the point of this whole report?
No, there was absolutely no pressure put on the department.
I mean, who were the people that were furious from your office? They were quoted in the report saying people are furious because it hadn't gone live yet while the Prime Minister was speaking. Why were you so keen to have it go live?
I really want to take you up on the issue of pressure being applied simply because it was a lawful request for that statement to go out.
If the events in the report don't make the pressure clear, a conclusion actually says the detailed chronology of events indicates there was pressure placed on officials to release a public statement.
I want you to be honest and truthful. I think the people deserve it.
Please be careful with that accusation, because I have always been truthful and I have always answered the questions that have been put to me.
That was Rick Morton from the Saturday paper. He was a guest on Channel 9 and he was grilling the former minister. Labor's new Minister for Home Affairs, Claire O'Neill, then made her thoughts on Karen Andrews' honesty pretty clear.
This morning, the former Minister for Home Affairs, Karen Andrews, came forward, told lies about her actions on that day and raised a series of further questions about the interactions of the then Prime Minister's office and her office in relation to the report that was released.
The reality seems to be that Karen Andrews, Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party knew what they were doing was unprecedented and wrong. They pressured public servants, and those public servants actually pushed back. Then Karen Andrews got on national television and tried to lie her way out of the situation. I also want to touch on a theory that's been floating around. A journalist, Karen Middleton, also from the Saturday paper, pointed out an odd coincidence with information she had received well before Election Day. I'll let her explain.
I received a message on April the 26th from a member of the Sri Lankan Australian community saying that 2 boats were on the way. He said that he had a friend in Colombo who had witnessed people being put on a boat by Sri Lankan police, that he alleged that the Sri Lankan authorities had facilitated the boat, and he said it was designed as an election stunt to arrive in Australia just before the election. I can't verify the information. I spoke to the guy, I didn't know him at all, but we just had to leave it because we couldn't do anything. But it's interesting that this has now happened, and I have been noticing, boats have been coming up again in messaging in the last few days.
The coalition sure was running a lot of boat people messaging in the days prior to the election, which again doesn't make much sense given Labor has the same policy as them. The fact that the investigation into this was done within the department and not independently means it was never going to uncover whether there's any truth to this theory. To be fair, there hasn't been any additional evidence come out in support, but you never know with the secretive and deceptive coalition. More likely is that this whole thing was a desperate, opportunistic stunt to try and run a last-minute scare campaign, because there wasn't really much else going for the Morrison government. Thank goodness it didn't work. Thanks for watching. If you want to help me make more content, please consider checking out my Patreon page, links in the description.